We have 2 in the lobby right now. All right, I'm gonna let them in. Cool. And I'll give you the thumbs up. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. Hi, good afternoon. This is John Godey with Dean Dorton. Thanks for joining us for this session of Cloud Days. We are presenting today on optimizing your cloud. Again, my name is John Godey. I have Danny here with me also. Danny Gouge, Technical Services Manager. And thanks for hopping on with us. We're going to dive right into our content today. As we get into this, we're going to ask you a couple of polling questions, and what you're seeing right now are some instructions on how to participate in those polls. You can do it 2 different ways. One, texting. So if you text a message to 22333 and then enter Dean D222, you can then respond to the selections for the polling questions that are coming up. There'll be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, depending on the number of choices we have for each question. Or you can go right to the internet and try to do that also. And we'll kind of get into that as we get into our presentation here. But feel free to participate in those polls. We'll stop and pause and let everyone vote as we go through that, and we're executing on those. Give you a sneak peek of our agenda. First area we're going to focus in on is around Microsoft 365 cost and feature optimization. So looking at some things, some tips, lessons learned, how we can look to optimize some of the cost and the feature usage there in Microsoft 365. We're going to spend a few minutes looking at the Power Platform in the center of excellence. This is some tools to help us understand what's in that Power Platform mix inside an organization to help with governing, controlling, and optimizing kind of how that's being used. We'll look at a little bit of Azure cost optimization, really pointing you in the areas you can leverage to make the most out of Azure and get the benefit from it. And then number 4, we're going to give you some information about a free optimization check that Dean Dorton's doing for participants and people who watch the webinar kind of downstream. First thing we're going to ask a question of you that we'd like for you to vote in on. And this is a general question of what stage are you in your cloud migration? So if you can, go ahead and text your responses in. And again, the instructions are at the top on the poll on how to submit your responses. So what stage are you in your cloud migration? Currently hybrid, kind of feet in both camps, or transitioning to that world, thinking about it. Maybe you're fully on premise, or maybe you're already fully in the cloud. We'll give a moment here as we wait for those to feed in. There we go. So we got one group thinking about migrating. Here we go, some of our responses rolling in. Currently hybrid. Okay, very good. It's about half and half so far. If anyone else can throw any answers in, that'd be great. Give another minute, and we'll move on to our next question. Okay, very good. Well, we'll pause on that poll. We actually have a follow-up question, I believe, right after this one. Let me pop forward to it. Oops. I don't want that up there. Trying to get off my poll here. There we go. The second poll question, if you would answer that for us, how do you rate your cloud cost optimization today? So just kind of from your perspective and what you know about your organization, where would you rate yourself on the amount of effort or how you've done with your cost optimization in the cloud? So you've not really assessed it, would be A. For B, you use the reports and things that come out of Azure and M365, or you're already fully optimized and you're not the Again, this polling, same response pattern. You're going to text in A, B, or C into Dean D222 to get established on the number there, 22333. Then you can respond with A, B, or C. Okay, so I haven't really assessed the cost optimization. Very good. We'll give another minute, waiting for some responses to come in there. Okay, well, that's good because our content today is about optimization. So if you've not fully assessed your optimization, that's a good thing for this presentation. So with that, Danny is going to step in and start to talk some about the Office 365 optimizations.
Thanks, John. So when you talk about a cloud investment, I think one thing that almost every company can relate to is Microsoft 365. You don't have to have your infrastructure in the cloud. You don't have to have a high-end cloud ERP system to have a significant cloud investment. And Microsoft 365 is really fits the mold for companies that are just 1 or 2 people all the way up to 10,000 people. That wasn't always the case. And this is going to make some people feel old, but as we all know, Office 365, sort of the precursor to that was Exchange Online. Microsoft actually soft launched that to select enterprise customers back in 2005, and it hit GA in 2008. At the time, also believe it or not, that Exchange Online in and of itself was $10 a user a month. And that just wasn't really feasible for smaller organizations, especially during a time when Small Business Server was still around, where you had, sort of an all-in-one box that had AD and Exchange and SharePoint and Print Server and all of that kind of stuff. And the real game changer there was when they added Office to the mix, the Office licenses, and pretty much kept it at the same cost. So it's really when the economies of scale kicked in, and Microsoft was actually able to offer that at a lower cost. And the first version of Office 365 was pretty much Exchange, SharePoint Online, Skype Online, and the Office licenses. And what made that really appealing to small organizations is back in that time, it was really difficult to keep track of Microsoft Office licenses for smaller companies. You would see Office 98, 2000, Office 2003 in use years and years after Microsoft cut the cord there and stopped offering security updates, because it was such a huge investment when a small to medium business had to upgrade Office. You're talking, $200 to $400 a head, depending on which Office level you went with. And that was a significant expense for smaller companies, especially when you consider that more than likely those Windows Server licenses plus CALs and Exchange license plus CALs was probably a smaller investment than simply upgrading Office. So that really was the genesis of Office 365. And the value has changed tremendously since then. Initially we were talking about 3 or 4 apps. And now today, if you have a user with Business Premium, log into their Microsoft 365 account through a web browser, and if you go to the full app list, this is what you're going to see. It's an enormous number of apps. A lot of them may be new to you. And real quickly, I'm going to point out one really obvious one. If you notice, there's a Visio logo down there. That's not a special Visio license. Just within the last couple of months, Microsoft has added a cut down version of Visio to do things like org charts and simple diagrams and flow charts. Whereas, now you would see people trying to create that in Excel, which really makes my head hurt. I can't imagine how much of a pain that is. I'm not an Excel expert, but it doesn't look very fun. And, on the flip side of that, you'll see some people purchase a full version of Visio to do simple diagrams like that. So that's a really great recent example of how the value of Microsoft 365 constantly evolves and constantly changes. And to really fully optimize it, you have to keep on track, you have to keep on top of those changes to make sure that you're fully utilizing this. So, just the Visio right off the bat, it was just added. If you're using Excel for flowcharts, it's going to help you right off the bat. If you're using Visio for simple flowcharts, it's going to save you a bunch off the bat because you can forego that Visio license. So we talked about the evolution and the addition of apps. How do you keep up with that? And that's really, as I said before, that's really key to optimizing your investment. You have to know what the current offering is to be able to utilize it. And the first way is Microsoft 365 Message Center. I don't think it's there by default, but if you log into your Outlook or your Office 365 portal, and if you go to the Admin Center, you'll see right there on the homepage, you're able to add widgets. One of those widgets is Message Center. And you'll see three major types of notifications there. One is recent changes. And the cool thing about Message Center is it's really sort of customized to your tenant. When Microsoft rolls out a new service, they generally don't deploy it to tenants nationwide at the same time. You'll see it rolling out in waves. So in the recent changes, when you see one of those features that you're looking for to roll out in waves, you'll see a customized message saying, hey, this feature is now available in your tenant. So you don't have to keep looking for it. You can just look in Message Center. And aside from the changes, the recent changes, you'll see upcoming changes and required actions. And this isn't so much about optimizing your cloud investment as it is about keeping on top of actions that might be important in the future. Microsoft deprecates, Outlook protocols or something like that. You'll also see that in there, and they'll run a script behind the scenes and usually let you know if you're using those any of those deprecated features or protocols, so you can take action. But that's just another thing that you see in Message Center. My recommendation is to take a look at that, once a week or so. Things accumulate pretty fast, so if you try to do it once every 2 or 3 months, there's going to be so much stuff in there that you're probably going to miss a lot. The next thing is the Microsoft 365 roadmap. And if you've not taken a look at this, I highly recommend it. It's probably the largest source of information that you will see on Office 365 features that are in development, that are rolling out, and that are fully rolled out and deployed. You'll see thousands of features in there. And the cool thing is you can filter the features by application. So if you only want to see upcoming changes to Teams, for instance, you select Teams. And if you're looking for a specific feature, just look through that list. And you'll see, the features that are in development, you will see in the roadmap before you see them in Message Center, because they're really still being fleshed out, and they don't have a release schedule yet. Tons of useful information there. And finally, the Microsoft blogs. The link is there. You go to that link, you're going to see an overwhelmingly huge number of blogs, some of which are very stagnant. For some reason, Microsoft doesn't remove them or prune them out. But I just listed a couple of blogs that I recommend that I visit pretty frequently. One of them is the Windows IT Pro blog that you'll find in that list. And that really focuses a lot on the client side of things and how Microsoft 365 services will integrate with the client and how to deploy them properly. The Microsoft 365 blog is more of a general overall news blog for changes. And then every application has its own development team at Microsoft. And it's pretty amazing that most of those individual development teams have their own blogs as well. So if there's any application that you utilize quite a bit, I highly recommend frequently visiting those blogs so you can keep up to date on the features and make sure you're fully utilizing that. And I'm not big on the Azure side, on the Azure infrastructure side, but most of the big Azure features have their own development teams, and those development teams have their own blogs. So if you're heavily using an Azure feature, definitely check that list to see if that team has a blog, because you're going to see really focused information. And these are written by people on the development team, like I said. So more than just seeing a list of features that are upcoming, you can kind of get an idea of where the wind is blowing one way or another on features and what direction that product is headed, which is pretty valuable information, if you feel it's important to plan 3 to 5 years out, which it certainly is. And I just wanted to cherry pick a couple of applications that have come out. I'm not even going to say somewhat recently, but applications that you don't see commonly if you go to different organizations and you take a look at their Office 3 or Microsoft 365 usage. The first one is Stream. I very rarely see that implemented, and Stream is great. It's a internal YouTube, basically a internal company YouTube. You can use it for lots of things, employee orientation videos, training videos. A cool feature about it is it will automatically transcribe those videos once you upload it. So if you record a speech or an internal discussion, it's really awesome. You can go back through that video and just search for keywords and not have to scrub the whole thing looking for the information you're looking for. One of my favorite uses for Stream is when I'm evaluating new software. I love to see live demos. So I'll watch a live demo, usually one-on-one with the salesperson from that software company, and I'll always record that demo and put it in Stream, and then assign that Stream channel to a Windows or a Microsoft Teams channel, and then you put the brochures in the same channel, and you just keep everything there in one place, and that transcription really does you good because you can search for features that you discussed really easily instead of scrubbing the whole thing. And next is the integrated task list. This isn't a single feature per se, but it's a recent change that Microsoft did that really brings together a few features. And I guess one thing that I have to say is one of the first steps to really optimizing your Microsoft 365 usage is don't use every application. There's way too much overlap between them. Especially when it comes to Sway and right now Viva and Yammer, and all of those applications are kind of have their own purpose. So if you get off this call and say, oh wow, there's 10, 12 applications we're not using, don't go out and implement every one of them because there's too much overlap and you're going to end up with confused users on not knowing where the appropriate place to communicate is or to collaborate or where to find information. But a great sign of that turning around is the recent integrated tasks. You might have seen Planner. Some people might have used Planner. It's a great cut down project management tool. It's not going to replace Microsoft Project by any means, but if you're doing simple team projects and assigning tasks and prioritizing tasks, it's perfect. To Do is a standalone task application that actually came from Microsoft made an acquisition for Wunderlist, which was an iOS app. So they converted that to their own app. And for a while, To Do had its own task list. Planner had its own task list. And for people familiar with Outlook, Outlook had its own task list. And this was a great example of applications overlapping but not doing the same thing because none of those tasks synchronized between the other application, even though all of them held tasks. So within the last 3 to 4 months, Microsoft has pulled that together to where assigning a planner task will show up in your to-do list, or creating a shared to-do task will now show up in your Outlook task if somebody has assigned a task to you. So I think Microsoft is starting to recognize that overlap and that sort of nebulous jumble of applications they had, and this is a really good sign that some of those are really starting to line up. For smaller companies, Shifts is something that I don't think I've ever seen used in practice. I've helped a couple of companies get it implemented, but I've never gone into a client site and seen it already currently in use. A lot of companies are using ADP for clocking in and out and payroll and work schedules. Some people still use Excel for work schedules. And Shifts is one of those applications that I call it a sub app. It's really an application within Microsoft Teams. And it's really slick. You can, for smallish teams, you can set schedules, you can set groups, you can allow your users to clock in and clock out, keep track of timesheets. And you don't have to keep track of it on an Excel spreadsheet or written down on a cork board or whatever at the entrance. So if you really want to organize your scheduling and your clocking in and out, and you don't want to purchase a standalone product, that's a great place to look. It's already pre-built, easy to set up. And I'll just touch briefly on Microsoft List. It's You've probably seen the icon. It's probably the loudest, most recognizable icon now, but it's a very user-friendly version of SharePoint List. It's sort of an evolution of SharePoint List. And if you just go in there and click on New List and look at some of the templates, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at a lot of the pre-built, almost application type lists you can use, such as asset management or a ticket tracking system or something along those lines. And I think List has popped up somewhat recently within the last 12 months, but I'd venture to guess that a lot of, sorry, we've got a motion sensor on our light here. We're way too green for our own good. But lists are something that has evolved out of SharePoint and is super user friendly. It comes with forms to make entries into that, but it's a great, simple to use tool. So right now we've been looking through Microsoft 365 glasses, 365 apps, sort of with rose-colored glasses. There are a couple of examples of things not going so great, things going against you, and I just really bring this up to always have a plan B. If you start molding an important business process around a Microsoft app that you've subscribed to, you've always got to think about, okay, what would happen if this was gone 12 months from now? As long as you have some kind of direction, you should be fine. But a couple of examples of things that have changed, not for the better, was Microsoft acquired MileIQ, which is a really nifty mileage tracking application. A lot of sales teams and service departments, mobile service departments used it. Well, Microsoft purchased MileIQ. They rolled it in as an included part of Microsoft 365. And just maybe a year ago, they finally built a Microsoft 365 admin center to it, so you can actually manage it, across the board, organization-wide. And I don't think it was 6 to 8 months after they announced that admin center and got that rolled out, Microsoft announced that the previous owners of MileIQ were buying the software back, and they were spinning that back out, and it was no longer going to be a part of Microsoft 365. That license was going to go away. They gave you an 8 or 10 month notice, but still, several companies had sort of built their compensation around that MileIQ application, and that was something they really had to rethink at that time. And another example is Power Apps. When Power Apps first came out, you were able to use Azure, an Azure SQL database as a database connector for free, and that was considered a basic connector. I built a simple CRM application for a customer that used Azure SQL as a backend because for a smaller database, it's very cost efficient, very easy to use. And about a year or two later, Microsoft announced that they were readjusting the license levels of Power Apps and ended up removing that feature and making that a premium connector, which required a full version of Power Apps. So that was something that Microsoft kind of called an audible on and changed, even though some people had actually implemented that into their workflow. So it doesn't happen very often, very small percentage of times, but it's still something to look out for. So right now we've been talking about feature utilization and not a lot about cost utilization and cost optimization. It's been a traditional thought that anyone who needed Outlook needed the full version of Office. And, up until recently, I would say that was pretty much the way to go. When Microsoft first came out with their web apps, they were not good. And unless you were viewing the simplest Excel spreadsheet or Word document, that was about all they were suited for. But that's changing quite a bit. You still want the full Office install for power users, advanced Excel users. And it'll still run on older hardware, but it's more of the usage requirements for people that need the full version of Office as to why you want to keep it on somewhat newer hardware. You don't want Kathy in accounting running 4 50 meg spreadsheets on an older laptop. And it does require some management overhead for the full install. You've got to deploy it, you've got to configure it, you've got to manage it. And, if Word crashes, Outlook crashes on you, you've got to troubleshoot at that point. And there's a cost involved, for the most basic, it's now called Microsoft 365 Business Basic, but it's $12.50 a month, and that does include Office. Now you can step down to the Essentials, I believe it's called now. They've changed the name so many times, but it's basically Microsoft 365 without the full version of Office. You're going to save about $6 to $7 per user per month, and it's really come a long way. If you look at the release notes for Outlook web apps, you're going to see a lot of changes. Microsoft's really making a big push to bring it up to feature parity with some of the applications. It really works well for users that primarily view documents rather than create. Hardware agnostic. You got an older Chromebook in the corner, or you've got some dumb terminals that you can make a web kiosk from. As long as it has a modern browser, it'll work. There's less maintenance and troubleshooting. There's nothing to install for the most part. It really only works if you're utilizing OneDrive and/or SharePoint libraries. And I'll go off on a small tangent here. If you're not already utilizing OneDrive for all of your users, that's something that you certainly need to do to get the full value out of some of your user apps. A lot of companies leave that up to, a new person gets a laptop and they leave it up to the user to log into OneDrive or not. There's actually really great group policies that you can use for OneDrive that will automatically log in that user. It'll automatically activate known folder move, which will take your desktop folder, your pictures folder, and your documents folder and automatically sync them to the cloud, which makes it absolutely invisible to the end user. So anybody saving something on their desktop or documents primarily will automatically get those uploaded to the cloud. And that also really only works if you can be sure that it's actually working properly on every endpoint. And Microsoft just added recently a OneDrive admin center to Microsoft 365, which is really awesome because it will show you stats on all of your users, who's running OneDrive, how many files they have in there. It'll show you things like, are there any synchronization errors, and do they have known folder move installed? So it's a great tool that gives you peace of mind that your files on your user endpoint laptops or PCs or whatever are protected, and the loss of a PC or data or even being crypto locked won't wipe out their data. And you don't have to worry about other backup solutions for that. And another feature of OneDrive that I want to point out that not a lot of people know about is its snapshotting feature. It's really a ransomware protection mechanism to where if an endpoint gets crypto locked, and even if those files get synchronized back up to OneDrive, there's actually just a button to where you can revert to an entire snapshot and basically revert a user's entire OneDrive to get away from that ransomware. And one of the reasons that the web apps have really come a long way is Microsoft's push for progressive web apps. And I don't have a demo environment set up now. That's probably for another webinar. Progressive web apps are really awesome. They work if you're using Chromium-based, which is Chrome itself, or the new Microsoft Edge browser, as well as Safari will work also. But if you go to Outlook Web Access, if you're using one of those browsers, you'll notice an icon at the top that allows you to install that as an application. And it's really cool because it will take the web version of Office. It will actually install it as a pseudo app. You'll get the Outlook icon on the bottom, and it looks and feels like a regular application, but it's actually a web app, and there's nothing installed on your PC. There's a few limitations to it. You can't open PSTs. You can't add external email accounts. And if you're using standard Outlook plugins, that won't work, although a lot of developers have already developed plugins for the web-based version of this. You still can configure it where you get desktop notifications for new emails coming in and new calendar items. And if you have users that aren't doing mail merges, they're not doing email blasts, they're not doing anything in advanced really in Outlook, you really need to take a hard look at using some of these web apps because that can substantially reduce your cost. And to really get away from having to buy Office for people that don't even need the features of the full version. So those were end user features. And I'm going to go over a couple of things from an administrative standpoint. How do you maximize value as an administrator? One is Microsoft 365 usage reports. And you can monitor service adoption. You can write emails until your fingers cramp. You can scream at employees till you're blue in the face. But they may not be using Teams, and there's up until recently there was no way to tell. So with service adoption, if you log into your admin center, on the left-hand side, you'll see a reports menu item. And you can dive into there and see Teams messaging frequency. Is everybody using Teams like they should? How often are people emailing? You can see OneDrive file save activity. And those are just a few things, but you can review the usage statistics of pretty much anything in Microsoft 365 if you want to keep tabs on how much people are using it, if they're using things as much as you think they should. Another thing you can do with the usage report is monitor licenses. One thing I like to do is prune accounts by looking at the Exchange Online login date. If somebody has a Microsoft 365 account, that's probably because their minimum need is an email account. You don't really see people using other features that aren't using an email account. So I'll look at the Exchange Online last login date, and anybody that's not logged in more than a month or two, take a look at those accounts. It's pretty common for users to leave and an administrator blocking that account or disabling that account, but not remembering to remove the license. So you can filter that by licensed and unlicensed users. So if you see a lot of licensed users that aren't utilizing Exchange, you can pretty much bet that they've probably left the company, and that's something that you need to investigate. But that's something that you should definitely take a look at periodically. And John, after I turn it over, is going to talk about Surveil, which is an application that can help you do things like that from more of an automated standpoint. Facilitating user adoption. None of this does you any good if users don't accept the product and use the product or the features that you put out in front of them. Take it one step at a time. As I said before, don't try to deploy a lot of apps at once. Don't try to do too much. Ease everybody into it. Throw some goodies in the pot. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do with Microsoft Teams that really can engage users. Now, if you think about it, I would say your employees, probably their favorite day of the week is payday. And a lot of companies are using ADP. Well, ADP has a bot that you can plug into Microsoft Teams that can do things like you can interact and see your paycheck breakdown. You can see benefit information. You can see retirement information. You can request time off. So it's kind of a neat little thing that people can do. On payday, they can log in and see their check breakdown and things like that. There's some other fun apps in there like trivia apps and things to drive user adoption and make them use it. And once people get engaged with something like Teams, it's incredibly extensible. That's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. You could probably do an entire webinar on just Teams. There's a lot of applications in Teams to where I would say it's almost small business SharePoint now. It's so extensible and you can do so much with it. And Microsoft has a lot of training materials. If you go to that link right there, ranging from simple Microsoft Office training videos to a lot of their cloud applications have training videos too. So if you don't hire an external trainer or enlist a third-party website for training, that's a good way to get basic training. But I just want to touch on these two things really quick. Windows Update compliance isn't that new. But I rarely see this in use, and it's a really cool feature of Azure AD that's free. It can replace WSUS, Windows Server Update Services, which is really long in the tooth. And you can roll this out with group policies in your local AD, and you can control Windows Update channels. You can control approvals. I think that's in the works. I don't know if you can do that now, but they've got individual approvals, I think, coming soon. But you can go into Azure, and you can actually see PCs that have reported into the Update Compliance Center in Azure. You can get an idea of what version PCs are on, have they been updated properly, what was the reason they've not been updated properly. So if you don't have a current Windows Update monitor to make sure you're fully patched, or if you're using WSUS, take a good hard look at Windows Update Compliance, because that might fit your needs and it's something that you're already paying for. And lastly, and I think this is one of the greatest developments, is passwordless authentication. A lot of companies are using MFA now. Everybody knows how that works. You type in your username and a password, and you get a notification on your phone, yes or no. Was it you or was it not you? And, at least from my standpoint, I see that as still a small opening to be phished, because you might get a user not thinking, get a notification on their phone, and they click yes, not knowing that someone who phished their password was the one initiating that message. Passwordless authentication, once set up, you do have a password, but that's just for initial onboarding. But to log in anywhere, all you do is enter your username, which is your email address, into Microsoft 365. And it'll give you a 2-digit code on the screen. And now the Authenticator app will give you a corresponding 2-digit code that you type in. And you really have to be on the screen in front of you, and you have to have your device in your hand. And you have to make those two codes match. Otherwise, there's no way that you could accidentally log somebody in. I guess technically you could. You still have a 1% chance of that, if you guess the code correctly. But I don't think anybody would do that. And it's great because it truly is passwordless. If you're doing password rotations now, and if that's a headache of people forgetting their passwords or locking themselves out or whatever, this is a real way to remove passwords, and I think it works great. And it still takes into account that even though you can log in anywhere, even a stranger's PC or at the airport, which I highly recommend not doing, at least on a kiosk somewhere, but it still requires you to have, for something you have, which is your physical phone, and something you or you are, which is your method to unlock the phone. It will force you to whatever phone you have this installed on, before you can set up passwordless, it will enforce you to have some kind of Face ID, fingerprint, or PIN code on it. So it does have that security restriction, just so somebody can't pick up your phone and use it. But anyway, that's what I have. I know I went through a lot. It was definitely more than I thought I could put in here, but I just got on a roll once I started doing this. And this could be a whole webinar in and of itself, like I said. But if any of you have any more questions about anything that we talked about, or need help being pointed in the right direction, my email address is on the spreadsheet or on the PowerPoint. And I'll turn it over to you, John.
Great. Thanks, Danny. That was a lot of content.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of information there, a lot of good stuff. Hard to keep on top of all that.
Yeah, it could be a part-time job, really.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We're going to, of course, stay in the Microsoft world, but we're going to turn our focus over to specifically the Power Platform. And with that, I have a question for the group here. If you can text in your responses to this, is which parts of the Power Platform are you using today? So Power Automate, Power Apps, Power BI, Virtual Agents, or none? If you can give me your feedback on that. Again, instructions there at the top of the slide on how to send in those notifications. I appreciate your participation. And Power Platform, as we're waiting for these to come in, Power Platform is really if you look at the evolution of development tools, the things we can do in Power Platform today compared to 10 years ago, you had to have a hardcore developer to really use the Power Platform, or to produce something the quality that we have for Power Platform applications. And really a team of developers, not a developer. It would take a team of developers to do that today. So we're glad we have the Power Platform. So we have Power BI as a big winner here today for what's being used on the Power Platform. And again, that's a great tool, definitely a cornerstone of the Power Platform. What we're going to end up looking at, there we go. So this is we're going to focus in on the Power Platform Center of Excellence. So as I mentioned, this Power Platform is a collection of tools that have been put together by Microsoft to enable users within an organization who are not professional developers to really build applications and build business processes that can be supported by that technology. And we have several parts of the Power Platform. We have Power BI, which we had some winners on that from adoption or user people who are using that part of the Power Platform, and Power Apps, Power Automate, and then Power Virtual Agents. All those services really leverage and sit on top of the set of data connectors. The data connectors kind of let me pull things together into these apps and let me interact with them. I can use the AI Builder as a supplemental service like the Power Virtual Agents to really build out some of the AI models that I want to use to do some analysis and prediction on different data sets. And then we have Dataverse. So Dataverse, that's kind of a new name. If you don't follow Microsoft closely, Dataverse is a new term within the last year or so, where this is the cloud-friendly database. So it used to be called the Common Data Store, or CDS, but now we call it Dataverse, and it's really grown to be a database that can be used across all these applications to support the needs of where we're trying to go to. So with that, we have this Power Platform now, and as an organization, I can, if you want to say, unleash this on my user population, I absolutely can do that. I can allow people in my organization to start building apps. They can build workflows, they can build connectors, and they can do all kinds of things inside this Power Platform. And what the Power Platform Center of Excellence, believe it or not, is, it's actually a Power App. Okay, so it's a Power App that sits on top of the Power Platform infrastructure to pull in information so we can understand what's going on. And it's really broken down into 3 different areas. We have visibility, we have govern, and we have nurture. So the visibility piece is all about gathering information about what's going on within the Power Platform environment. So how many apps do I have? How many Power Automates? How many flows? What kind of flows do I have? Who are the major people who are playing inside this Power Platform space? That's what visibility, the visibility piece of the Center of Excellence solution really gives to me. So the Center of Excellence, as I said, it's a Power App, so it's a solution we can download from Microsoft and install into your existing tenant, into your Microsoft tenant to give you visibility into all those things. There's 2 other, so it's really kind of split into 3 major areas. We have the core platform, which is really all about visibility, pulling that information in and letting you see what's going on within the platform. Then we also have a governance and some nurture applications that support really trying to put some guardrails around the usage of the Power Platform. So if we want to start to build out some rules around, who can create apps, what process do we want people to follow to be able to build an app? So do we want to put some things in place that say, if I'm going to let this person build a Power App, they need to have completed, X number of hours of Microsoft Learn training that show you the fundamentals of Power Apps, or is there, some kind of an exam we want them to take to really get them to move over to this, what we call into the maker community that can start to build some of these apps and some of these tools with the Power Platform. And then the third part is really nurture. So it's how can I start to grow this culture of the Power Platform within my organization? How can I bring together the people who are leaders in the community? So as you look at the Center of Excellence and you have visibility into who is actually building applications and delivering solutions, you're going to quickly be able to see who are the leaders in that space. So these people are doing a lot of that work. You can bring them together and start to nurture and build that community so you can get more value out of your Power Platform. And at the end of the day, that's why Power Platform is in place. High-end technology resources to build custom developed solutions, those are expensive and their time is limited. And so what Power Platform gives us is we can give business users the ability to put together some solutions that can really make a difference in the day-to-day processes that they have to do in an organization. So with that, that's kind of a good summary of the Center of Excellence. And now what I'd like to do is kind of show you some instances of some of the information we get from visibility. So with the core components for the Center of Excellence that can be set up, we're going to look at one of the perspectives that we get to look at. One is environments. So for Power Platform is all about environments. So think of an environment as it's a container for activity. So at the very top level of your organization, you have a Microsoft 365 tenant. Inside that tenant, you can have multiple environments, and these environments can be used for many different purposes. So in the bottom left corner of this slide, you'll see total environments. this gives you an idea of the different kinds of environments we can be working within. So one is a sandbox environment. I can have a production type, I can have developer type environments, I can have a teams focused environment. So back to Danny's information about teams. So that's one of the things that's been enabled recently is that teams now can leverage this Dataverse database environment so that we can build a relational data model that lives within just my Microsoft Teams team environment, and I can have all the resources who interact with that team leveraging that data. And then we have our default environment. So if you do nothing at all within your Microsoft 365 tenant and you just went to make Power Apps and to make your Power Automates, they all drop into the default environment by default. So you always have one default environment. And depending on what you're trying to do with the platform, you want to try to set up your environments to support the different needs of your teams and your organization. So as you can see, this is giving us a breakdown of really what's going on within each one of the environments. So as we look at in the top right corner in this area, this is showing me what's going on with each one of these environments. So I have in the Contoso development environment, I have 155 Power Apps and I have 66 different flows that are being built out. So this is really giving me a lens into what's going on across all of those environments. It's really difficult to aggregate that information without without this kind of a lens to aggregate all that information together for you. And related to this aggregation, you're looking at Power BI. So again, you know, the Center of Excellence itself is a Power App, and then it's further leveraging another piece of the Power Platform to pull this data together for us to visualize it. You'll see on the right, we have some filters we can use to kind of massage this information and hone in on what we're trying to look at. So again, this is our picture of environments. And as we look at this, we've kind of drilled down in specifically into the Teams environment. And this is where you can see a lot of growth in a hurry. As if Teams is widely used within your organization, if people pick up on and start to use the Power Apps, which use which leverage the Dataverse components, you'll have environments that get spun up for each one of your teams. So that environment is scaled back from the full-blown Power Apps environments that we can have, and I'm limited on the database size. It's going to keep it at about 2 gigabytes is where I can grow that to for each one of my team's Dataverse environments. But this gives us a perspective of what's going on just within that team space of the different environments that we have set up. And again, all this information is collected through examination of the logs within your Microsoft 365 environment. So it's using some of the auditing and the log monitoring tools to pull that information together and pull that out into our different environments. This is going to give us some dashboards on a couple of the other parts of the Power Platform. So Power Automate, again, this one is giving us a couple other slices, but if we're using Azure Active Directory and keeping track of our departments, this metric is showing me kind of the top 10 active departments within Power Automate. So based on my department designation in Azure Active Directory, it's giving me some report outs on who are the biggest users across these departments for Power Automate. And keep in mind with Power Automate, you know, that can be any number of things. I can be using that to move data between places. I can be using it to do approvals of content. I can be using it for what are called UI flows or data collection flows, where I take someone through a series of steps to collect information. But again, this is a lens into that activity within the Power Automate space. App usage, again, this is another, and again, these are all things that are in the Power Platform, the Center of Excellence environment. And the data that we're looking at is from one of the demonstration environments that they use to put together kind of some of the baseline reports and templates on it. So this is showing me the app's launch. So it's showing me really the usage of the applications and who's using them the most. So top right corner, Adele, she is this particular user, Adele Vance, is launched applications 234 times. If we look at the actual apps themselves, the baby care launch is the most popular one. So looking at that, you know, those application names, of course, don't mean anything to you, and those users don't mean anything to you. But when you take this lens and point it at your organization, you can quickly see the applications that are the most used. And as you look at this, this can help you make some decisions about where you want to spend time, maybe nurturing some of that community. So if you have a lot of Power Apps being developed by one or two individuals, you can use them to help with nurturing and growing the value that you're getting from the platform by understanding who's really owning and driving forward with these apps. Connections, this is another interesting one. So back on our first slide that described the Power Platform, Connections is one of the pieces that was underneath all of the major applications that we have within the Power Platform. The Connections really become the heart and soul of the Power Platform because they allow you to get things and do things. The Connections let me connect to SharePoint, they let me connect to databases, they let me connect to other applications, they even let me connect to applications outside of the Microsoft 365 space. What this report's doing is it's telling me which ones are the most popular. It's telling me the ones that are getting the most leverage and the most work across all the applications and flows that I've put together. And you can see again, purple for apps, blue for flows. This is showing you where that content's being used. So that's kind of our Power Platform piece. Again, this is the center of excellence. It is a set of components that Microsoft has that can be deployed into your environment to help you get a pulse on what's going on within that Power Platform stack that is being used across your organization. If you would definitely reach out to myself or Danny if you have any more information about that. We really looked at the visibility components here. There's also a governance and a nurturing piece too that goes along with this. And it's an extendable platform. It's there to be customized to better suit your specifics for your specific organization. So with that, I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to touch on a few highlights around some of the Azure cost optimization. So when we're talking about Azure, I'm talking about the services that run in the Microsoft Azure space. And for this exercise, and I think Danny kind of mentioned this also, when you're looking in terms of trying to manage that Microsoft environment, this is not a one-time, point-in-time thing. This is an ongoing exercise that you're going to need to do. And one of the easiest places to start is in the Azure Advisor. Okay, so Azure Advisor is a dashboard service within the Azure portal that you can go to. If you just type in Azure, if you type in Advisor at the top of your Azure portal, it'll bring up the Advisor screen and it lets me do a couple things. One, it's going to immediately give me a readout and some recommendations on cost, performance, resources. It's going to give me some information about things that it suggests I could look at to either further improve my cost or resource utilization, or just better taking advantage of the services that are available and deployed and being used inside my Azure environment. So that's kind of the Azure Advisor piece, and related to that is this concept of alerts for the Azure Advisor. So if there are things that I'm specifically interested in monitoring and I want to be alerted about, within that same area of Azure Advisor in your Azure portal, you can subscribe to alerts and define the alerts that you want to be notified for specifically to help with managing maybe the costs or the resource consumption around your Azure resources. And a third element that will change and grow over time are reservation recommendations. And we'll talk a bit about what reservations are here in a moment, but there's actually a REST API that you can use. So if you have some other monitoring tools that you're pulling information into, you can use this REST API and it will bring back recommendations for specific scopes. So whether it's your entire subscription that you have, or if you want to really narrow it down into more specific resource groups within your Azure portal environment, you can direct this REST API to target those areas and we'll bring back recommendations to have those surfaced in one spot for you. So those are some kind of top level areas to look at in your Azure portal to make sure you're monitoring that. And then I wanted to touch specifically on reserved instances because this can be a big return for you. Reserved instances, this is a different way of securing your resources inside of Azure. So in about 5 minutes. Reserved instances are an alternative to pay-as-you-go. Pay-as-you-go is more expensive than reserved instances. So a reserved instance is where I'm saying I'm going to prepay for a certain amount of this resource over a particular period of time. It's 1 to 3 years. But what this allows me to do is I get a substantially discounted rate. So this will make sense for you to look at if you have long-running resources. So it's not going to be something that's very short-term. You have to do this reservation for 1 to 3 years for particular types of resources. As you look at the different scopes that your reservations can apply to, you can do it at the subscription level, you can do it at the resource group level, and I think this should take me out to some of the things that are, yeah, sorry, I got to jump up here in front of the camera to get the keyboard. Sorry about that. So I can flip back to my presentation. This is showing you, these are the list of all the resources that can be covered by this reservation plan. So any of your virtual machines, your database, your storage, Azure Databricks, numerous ones here to look through and list for, but these are all resources that can qualify for that reserved instance program. Two other areas, or one other area, and then we'll look at some of these 7 other cost optimization areas to focus in for Azure. One is a hybrid use license. So if you are in a hybrid scenario where you have a Microsoft SQL Server license for an on-premise SQL Server, or you have a Windows Server licensing that's for your on-premise services, you really need to look at the hybrid use license that you can use within Azure. This will give you a substantially discounted price for the licensing required to run your services in the cloud for Windows Server and for SQL. This hybrid use license, there's actually a calculator that we can run to, I can put my information in here, and no, I'm not going to sit and survey right now, but this is going to show me the hybrid use, the savings that I can get by applying that hybrid use license. So if you have on-premise licenses for server and for SQL Server, make sure you're taking a look at this. This can really save you some cash in the long run. I want to also take a quick peek here at 7 general cost optimization tips. So number 1 is shut down unused resources. So funny story, in a former life, I worked for a call center, and our call center sales agents, they had to demonstrate their solution on VMs that they would have running in our cloud environment. What inevitably would happen is we give them a powerful VM that they would start up for their sales demo. Then they would be excited because they won the business, and they would never turn the virtual machine off. So shutting down unused resources, you can script that today. So script the shutdown of your resources, because you know these things don't need to run 24/7. Script them to shut off at the end of the day, and then the salespeople can start them up, or whoever's using those resources at the end of the period. And then a couple other ones to pick out here. One is auto scaling. So another sore point is not sore point, but an easy one is when we size virtual machines or the resources that are being used. You can have this grow. This is number 5 here for the auto scaling. So we can have this grow as the load requires it. So I don't have to have 20 cores allocated to this VM. I can let it grow over time as the resource consumption dictates. And then number 7, I will touch on this. This is the Azure Compute Resource. So early on, virtual meant I have to have a virtual machine to run all these things, to run an operating system. That's not really the case with Azure. I have a bunch of individual different services that I can use. A perfect example of that is Azure Functions. So if I have some logic that I want to embed inside of an Azure function, maybe some special calculations to derive some formula, I can have this thing fired up on demand. I don't need a full virtual machine to run all that. I just use the Azure function, put the intelligence into that function, and then from there, we're just charged for the consumption on that particular resource. So those are some of the highlights from the Azure cost optimization. I know we're getting close to time here for our particular presentation. So before we wrap up here, I want to throw out something for you. Danny had mentioned the solution that Dean Dorn has. It's called Surveil. Surveil is a solution that will monitor your Microsoft 365 environment. So it's registered as an application, and it monitors all the licensing, all the activity, all the things that are going on within your Microsoft environment. And then it will give you a summarized health check to say, hey, you know what, you have too many licenses, or you have licenses that are not being assigned, that don't need to be assigned because they're not being used, or have the wrong types of licenses. And what we're offering for anyone who's viewed this webinar is a free 2-week health check. So we'll stand up this Surveil solution to monitor your environment for 2 weeks, and you'll have a free health check that comes out of that. A caveat of that, if you have just 1 or 2 users, it's not going to be as valuable as if you have 50+ users to really do that assessment. So the more users that are engaged on the platform, the better, as far as trying to provide a readout on optimization related to the licensing, the product adoption, and various other facets of how you're leveraging Microsoft 365. So with that, I know we went through that part kind of quick. Please reach out to myself. I'm John Goatee, and then also you can reach out to Danny Googe here he's our technology services manager. Here's our contact information. We'd love to hear from you, whether it's specifically for the 2-week offer or just if you have questions about cloud optimization in general. We're happy to have a discussion with you. So thanks so much for attending our webinar.
Thank you.